Is it a soundstage? Is this real?
Are you kidding? That's the real thing.
That's the real deal?
Yes, and we were out there for ages because the weather was not kind to us.
The Sound of Music was more than a film. It was a global phenomenon. From the Austrian hills to the hearts of people all around the globe, it turned into one of the greatest musicals ever produced. The children, the songs, the mountains, it was all just right, or at least that is how it appeared. But if you really look, things didn't go exactly according to schedule. There were some behind-the-scenes experiences that were absolute mayhem. Cast upheavals, on-set mishaps, and sure, blooper scenes that inexplicably found their way into the finished film. Take a closer look at what made the film so magical, as well as some behind-the-scenes trivia and big bloopers that made it past the editing room floor. A global phenomenon no one predicted. The Sound of Music was more than a film. It was an international phenomenon. This American musical drama was released in 1965, directed by Robert Weiss and Ernest Lehman, who wrote the script. The film features Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer with excellent support from Richard Hayden, Peggy Wood, Charmian Carr, and Eleanor Parker. The film is inspired by Maria von Trapp's book, The Story of the Trapp Family Singers, published in 1949. It is the story of Maria, a young governess who takes care of 7 children, falls in love with their father, and assists the family in leaving Austria when Nazi Germany is on the rise. The movie is filmed in Salzburg, Austria, but was partially shot in Los Angeles. Initially, not everybody adored it. Some reviewers weren't favorable, but audiences had something else to say. It soon became the #1 box office film within 4 weeks. By the end of 1966, it had even surpassed Gone with the Wind to become the all-time box office champ. In reality, it remained so for 5 years. The figures were astronomical. It set new records in 29 nations and ran in cinemas for 4.5 years. It had 2 large re-releases and grossed more than 283 million tickets worldwide. That was worth $286 million back then, which even surprises people to this day. But what really kept it going so long wasn't the gorgeous music or breathtaking locations. It was the heart. Folks related to it. But behind all that beauty were many secrets. From casting surprises to on-set issues, there's more to it than what you can read between the lines on screen. Let's begin with Julie Andrews, a role suited for 1 star, but who nearly went to others. With regard to casting Maria, there could only be one name that popped into writer Ernest Lehman's mind. For my money, there's only one woman who can play this part, and that's Julie Andrews, he declared. Julie Andrews was not well known at the time. She had completed work on just 2 films, and neither of them had come out yet. In point of fact, Jack Warner, one of the executives at Warner Brothers, did not cast her in My Fair Lady. He did not believe she was photogenic enough for the cinema. But then director Robert Weiss saw a preview of Mary Poppins, and he didn't act fast enough. He stated, "Let's go sign this girl before somebody else sees this movie and picks her up." That transformed everything. Nevertheless, Julie wasn't the sole name under consideration. The roster was brimming with stars. Doris Day, Grace Kelly, Shirley Jones and Braftoft, Angie Dickinson, Carol Lawrence, and even Leslie Caron. But ultimately, Julie secured the role that would turn into one of her most enduring. Despite this, she didn't get rich off of it. Julie allegedly contracted for only $225,000 and received no ownership in the profits. That was acceptable at the time. She wasn't a star yet. But subsequently, with Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady becoming blockbusters, she was being approached for up to $1 million per film. Julie was concerned also that the film would be too sugary. At her initial meeting with Robert Wise, she quizzed, "How are you going to get all the sugar out of this picture?" That's when Wise knew she got the message. The film needed balance, and Julie provided it. And although Maria's part was already established, the cast still had massive casting issues on the horizon, particularly the captain. Christopher Plummer refused. Christopher Plummer, Captain Georg von Trapp, was not an easy sell to fill. Indeed, he turned down the part a few times. He disliked the way the character was written. To him, the captain had to be too flat, too rigid. That complicated things. There were other actors on the team to consider, and the list read like a who's who of movie stars. Sean Connery, Richard Burton, Bing Crosby, and Yul Brynner. But they all didn't feel right for him. Yet, Christopher wasn't ready to agree. So, he penned a letter to writer Ernest Lehman with one message clear. He wanted changes. He didn't want the captain to be a rigid father figure. He wanted character. The Sound of Music states that based on Christopher's request for something more worldly and depthful captain, he wanted him to have humor and show emotion. He also wanted his way of speaking to Maria to be dramatically different from his way of speaking to Elsa. The team concurred. Director Robert Wise and Lehman collaborated closely with him to implement those changes. Christopher requested a solo song that would be able to depict the captain's dilemma, how he was falling in love with Maria but did not know how to deal with it. It was risky, but it worked. Christopher infused something new into the character. He brought the captain a combination of charm and authority that no one would ever forget. With Julie and Christopher on board at last, filming could begin. But it wasn't all smooth sailing on location. Major casting made big casting changes. The Sound of Music boasted one of Hollywood's most memorable casts. But not everyone who auditioned got in. A long list of well-known actors read for roles, especially for the part of Liesl. Stars like Mia Farrow, Patty Duke, Kurt Russell, and Terry Garr were all considered. Mia Farrow auditioned not once, not twice, but 3 times for Liesl. In director Robert Weiss's notes, he wrote that Mia had a good reading and a very nice quality, but she didn't have enough energy. He also pointed out that her dancing wasn't strong, which was crucial in Liesl's part. Ultimately, the role went to Charm and Carr, who had the perfect combination of charm and movement. But casting was just one part of the challenge. Appearances were another giant concern, particularly when it came to the actor's hair. Julie Andrews actually had brown hair, but for the movie, the studio wished she were blonde. The studio initially attempted to give her highlights and ended up turning the color orange. Everybody was stunned. In order to correct it, they gave all her hair a complete blonde color. Daniel Truhitt, who played Rolf, also got his hair bleached for the role. But unlike Julie, the harm persisted. He explained, "My hair never grew back right after that. I lost half of my hair and it thinned out a lot. And although the children didn't require doubles, Julie did once." Her stand-in, Larry Thomas, is only to be seen in one scene in the final version. That's her hanging from a tree when the captain drives by and notices the kids. Lee had previously worked with Julie on Mary Poppins, which she even did some of the flying scenes for. But even with cast assembled, there were some serious bumps along the way in the production. At one moment, it almost brought everything to a halt. Set tension. Rain Christopher Plummer delivered a magnificent performance as Captain Von Trapp, but few realize just how close he came to leaving the project, and why his singing voice. Plummer discovered that his voice would be blended with that of a professional singer's in the released film. This greatly perturbed him. He took voice lessons and endeavored to practice in order to be able to use his own voice. But ultimately, the singing that is heard is a combination of his and that of another singer. Author Ernest Lehman subsequently quoted what Plummer thought of it. He stated, "Knowing his voice would be dubbed destroyed his ability to play the role." Plummer even mentioned he felt emasculated. That frustration almost caused him to quit. And that wasn't the hardest moment on the set. One of the first scenes they shot was when Liesl climbs through Maria's bedroom window after meeting Roll. It appears simple on screen, but in real life, it took 15 attempts to do it right. They had to film from so many angles to have Charmy and Carr appear like she just ran through thick rain. They used a cold water sprayer named Mr. Rainstorm. It soaked her between scenes, making her always appear wet. While they were doing that, the rest of the child actors didn't even begin filming until the second day. Their first scene was when they all jumped on Maria's bed and sang My Favorite Things. But the weather didn't break after that. In fact, it got worse when the rain halted the music. It may appear sunny and perfect on screen, but during filming in Salzburg in Bavaria, it rained nearly nonstop. It was so bad that the cast and crew often waited inside barns or tents for the rain to pass. The songs Do Really My and The Sound of Music were filmed in the midst of these downpours. The roads became so flooded and muddy that they couldn't even drive up the mountains. The crew camera equipment, and even the cast were carried up by ox carts because the Jeep couldn't get it. Director Robert Weiss mentioned one special moment with Julie Andrews during this period. He said one of his favorite memories of Julie was watching her bundled up in a fur coat, riding up the hill in an ox cart to get warm. Describing the tough opening scene, Robert Wise explained how long they had to wait. We'd sit up there under the tarps and wait. You don't want to go down the hill because it's such a big deal to get everything down there and then up again. But the weather wasn't the only thing that made filming the famous mountain scene difficult. There was also the challenge of getting the perfect shot. Big moments, bigger problems, bigger problems. The shot where Maria twirls on a mountain, singing The Sound of Music, is one of the most iconic in movie history. But filming it was far from simple. In order to get that shot, a cameraman was strapped to a helicopter and flown directly at Julie Andrews in the middle of the field. Because they had to do it 6 or 7 times. I was spitting dirt and hay and so on. And I was continually saying, couldn't you take a wider circle around? But nature wasn't the only challenge. There were also people. The field they filmed on belonged to a local farmer. When the crew first came through, they adored how tall the hay and grass were, so they asked the farmer to leave it be. But when filming began, he had cut everything down. That wasn't the end.